Next up, we have a panel of legacy brands discussing how they're transforming to fuel the digital economy. Please welcome to the stage Reuters' Jonathan Webber and his panel, Transforming for Legacy.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. That's certainly a tough act to follow. We don't have any spectacular sporting videos. I forgot to order up the soundtrack, so we don't really have that either. But we'll do the best we can with the very interesting panel that we have here. The question of digital transformation, the transformation of legacy companies, is something that concerns lots and lots of people in the business world, and for this group, I think in some ways it applies in a double sense, because several of these companies are companies that are both transforming themselves and also helping others to transform themselves. So I didn't want to be too formal here, so we have, just to give the brief introductions, we have Valérie from Total, we have Matt from Dell, Siva from Adobe, and Sumner from Intel. And so we'll jump right in with Adobe, which I think has a particularly interesting story of transformation. I mean, Adobe was a company that sold packaged software. You could go buy Photoshop for $1,000 or something, expensive piece of software wrapped in cellophane and with discs and stuff.
Yep.
And then that model really became obsolete, and Adobe faced a really fundamental kind of challenge, really a existential challenge to its business as to whether it could become something other than a packaged software business. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about that transformation and what you learned from it.
I think first thing is we started the transformation before it became obsolete. So I think that's one of the keys to look and see what's potentially over the horizon. As you said, we used to sell Creative Suite every 2 years. So people will wait for Creative Suite 4, 4.5, 5. How do you predict when, there were things like every 0.5 version is better, or it's worth waiting for this other thing. But it was an expensive piece of software. So you would pay $2,000, and it was really for the professional. So the guys that are walking around taking the videos, the professional photographers that are in this room. The idea was to, looking at cloud coming along, looking at subscription, and the big thing that we had as well is that Wall Street wanted predictable revenue. So they didn't know how each version would take on. How can we get to predictable revenue? Right? So a lot of that led to a subscription model. The idea was to do a subscription model, but the risk with that, or the danger with that, is if you were to sell something in the, one of these people want to buy Creative Suite in December, that's $2,000 revenue to Adobe. If they decide to buy a subscription in December, that's $50 to Adobe. So the better we were at this, the worse our revenue would be. So we had to go to Wall Street and say, this is our long-term plan, this is what we're sticking to, and as we were going along, the better we did, the worse our revenues would be. And and the stock price kept going up because it was going against the plan. So we were shifting people to that kind of model. And the idea really is to, instead of the photographers in the room, so that everyone in this room can afford or can get into it with a smaller subscription, everyone's a potential customer. So we've grown that. We've sort of been through the dip in revenue, so where we took a hit, came out of it a few months or a few quarters earlier, and now we're sort of growing it, much bigger revenues, more predictable, and a subscription model, which comes with its own challenges, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So from selling boxes through two-tier reseller model to subscriptions where we're touching customers in a digital way every day. So big transformation. And one of the things is...
And you did actually have to absorb like a revenue hit. Like
absolutely.
Revenue is going to go down before it goes up again.
I think there's a few things. One is revenue hit's going to be there, but you need to have a plan. The other thing is, I guess it's the Clayton Christensen innovator dilemma, is if we had listened to our best customers, or exclusively to our best customers, so the photographers in this room, what they want from the product would keep getting you into more and more of a niche thing. So if you listen to your customers, at the highest value customers, what they drive is not necessarily what's over the horizon and what else we can do. So our most valuable customers were not the casual photographer. Right? Our most valuable customer was a professional creator, which we've got to look after, but we did things that was against their desires, essentially, to kind of go after a much bigger market.
So this is the first time I've ever heard this on a panel like this. Don't listen to your customers.
Don't just go after your most high-value customers, because they can make you more and more niche.
Right.
Look at what else is out there. Look at your business at a fundamental level and see where else we can take you.
Matt, you're with Dell EMC, also Dell, kind of a legacy brand in the computer business, but now becoming a very different kind of company. Can you give us a few lessons from the transformation you've been undergoing?
Yeah, our transformational story is somewhat different, and it's very real for us, because in the last 2 years, Dell made the largest tech acquisition in history. Dell acquired the EMC Federation, and within that EMC Federation are a host of massive well-known brands. Brands like Pivotal, like VMware, like EMC, of course. And so bringing these different discrete businesses together to form a new entity, which is Dell Technologies, has been a massive transformation for us. And so we have a vision, and I'll use my words for this vision here of what this new organization looks like. It is high tech and it is high touch. And what I mean by that is we needed an organization that is going to be relevant beyond and into the 21st century. So that means big investments in artificial intelligence, in machine learning, in augmented and virtual reality. And these are massive investments that we've made through acquisition or internally through the development of new technologies. But of course, it's kind of ignorant, if you will, to just focus in on the technology from a customer perspective, because the other side of the equation is the high touch. The other side of the equation is what our people are doing. And the attributes that we needed to transform within our people are very real. The way that I describe that is people wisdom. We need people to act as innovators, and I guess you would call it digital Sherpas, because our customers are going on a transformational journey just like we are. And so mashing together different technology portfolios and realizing new and innovative solutions is something that's incumbent upon all of the staff within the organization.
So how is a digital Sherpa, different from your traditional sales rep, who comes in and sells you EMC hard drives and sells you VMware, virtual systems and whatever, right?
I think the fundamental difference is where you're looking down the road. I think there's an immediacy to technology, which is great, but we need people that can look a little bit further down the road and interpret the megatrends as they come down. We need people that can actually take a position on a technology portfolio, because when they do that, they're able to give more succinct and relevant advice for the customer, and that's quite a change from the traditional IT firm of the past.
I must say, observation, a company you're buying is big when it's called a federation.
Yeah.
It's like Darth Vader and all that.
But we're the good guys.
Sumner, can you speak to that? I mean, because similarly a little bit with Intel, Intel's a big, legacy company that sells hardware, and so how does a sale differ now from how it might have before? I mean, what different kinds of conversations, even a job like yours maybe didn't exist before?
Yeah, I mean, I think from Intel's perspective, and I'm conflicted hearing Intel described as a legacy brand, because in the technology industry, any company that's not innovative doesn't stay around for very long. And Intel, like Adobe and Dell, we've got a long history and a lot of technology and capabilities that we bring to our products today and in the future. In terms of how the customer is evolving and how the sales motion is changing, I think it really speaks to how technology's role in the business world has evolved. It's no longer a cost. It's no longer something that just facilitates business. Increasingly, it's core to business. It facilitates agility, it facilitates innovation, it creates business value. And so for me and my team, when we're talking to customers, if I start talking about specs, megahertz or cache size, anything like that, it's a sign that we're having the wrong conversation. The conversation we're having is really about how are the companies addressing the business challenges they face? How are they being disrupted? What are the new competitors and market entrants that they're worried about? How can they respond? What's holding them back and constraining them from a technology infrastructure perspective? And how can they evolve into a platform that enables them to be more competitive and more successful?
So, Valérie, how would a conversation like that, I mean, does that resonate with you as somebody who would be, say, a customer of some of the other panelists here? I mean, does that idea resonate with you that you want your vendors to help you with a bigger roadmap to show how technology can be more than a cost?
Hello everyone. So at Total we are definitely a legacy brand, because in 2024 we'll be 100 years old. So I believe, even if you guys, you think that legacy could be an handicap, I believe it actually makes us stronger, because in our core value, we've got the pioneer spirit, because when you work on oil, gas, and now renewables, solar energy, you have to not to be afraid of go and face challenges. So today, to transform ourselves and to try to simplify our customer journey and to try to simplify the way our sales reps are working and so on. My day-to-day business is to make people aware of the transformation which happen elsewhere. And for that, we organize more and more learning expedition to make people experiment by themselves the transformation. So very often we come and visit you at Adobe, Dell, Intel, and you help us to make people aware of what happens in other sectors, and it's very useful for us. So to give you an example, each year we select 12 colleagues, young colleagues, all around the world. The last session, people were coming from Pakistan, Zimbabwe, China, Saudi Arabia, so all around the world. And we invite them to come to our headquarters in Paris. And during 3 months, they eat digital breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And at the end of the 3 months, we organized a learning expedition. It was in California last time. And it is very important for us to have your experience of other sectors to share with these young colleagues. And we also do the same with C-level executives. Each year we send people to Las Vegas to CES, and our very top management, our ex-com, is also doing Innovation Week. In March, they were in China. Last year, they were in India. So each time they are meeting tech companies in order to foster our transformation.
And so what are some examples of, or an example of how digital transformation, which can be a bit of a buzzword, but what does that mean for Total? Like, what, an oil company, you sell oil and gas, it seems like a business that just is what it is,
I can give you a recent example. A few weeks ago, we signed an agreement with Google on artificial intelligence, sorry, for geoscientists. So we are sending a dedicated team from Total in Mountain View at Google headquarters to work together on how we could faster and introduce more, because we are used to work on big data when you are working on exploration production, but how we can go further.
Jonathan, I think that's a great example of something that would have been perceived as a cost that's now creating business value, because it wasn't that long ago when the data that companies were generating was seen as a burden. It was something they had to store, it was a cost, and now people are realizing that there's real tremendous value in that, and they're able to unlock it. And I think that's an example of how technology then starts to facilitate innovation and growth.
Mm-hmm. Siva, do you, the experience of Adobe, have you been able to bring that experience to your customers? I mean, has there been ways that you can
I think we've been somewhat fortunate, because our biggest change was, it was said, once in 2 year engagement to everyday engagement, and that front-end experience with all the technology to support that experience didn't really exist in one place. So we would use tools that Intel used, like Omniture, or I think Dell used like Day software and so on, that it was all kind of all over the place. So we really had to go out and build a platform that didn't exist. So once having built that and done that ourselves, there was a lot of pain and learning that we went through.
Build a platform for distribution
front-end experience and marketing.
Right.
I guess it used to be called Marketing Cloud. Build something from scratch, taking the best of bits that was out there. Nobody had tied all that together. So we had to kind of do that ourselves. And having done that, we then have taken that to market, and that's led to a lot of learning. So we've set up groups like mine here in Asia now, which is basically looking at transformation best practices. So when it comes to the experience front end that people do, how do you get a legacy bank or a telco that's got different channel go-to-markets, product-centric go-to-markets, to kind of look at it from a customer experience point of view? We've done that, and we've really been sharing a lot of that and building a community around people. I mean, these two are a couple of great examples of what they've done with their own marketing in the last 4 to 5 years and transforming that. And it's a lot of non-technology work that legacy companies have to go through. So for a startup, someone like One Championship, they've got this small team, they can get the tools and go really quickly. For a bank, how do you then organize a team? What are the skill sets you need? How do you organize the legacy teams? How do you get the traditional analyst to be a digital analyst? All of that kind of people process stuff is what we've been sort of going to market with and helping our customers with. So it's been a big plus for us to be able to share that kind of learning as well. Yeah.
So the people, can you elaborate? I didn't totally understand what you meant there.
People in the process. To make, technology is an enabler, the people in the process to change the way you go to market. So think if you are a bank, for example, you may have marketing teams by product. I'm the credit card marketing person, and then I'm going to go email as my channel. Changing that today to be a customer-centric or a segment-centric marketing approach, that's a big change that they need to go through as an organization, how they're KPI'd, how the teams are structured, and that's stuff that people have been on that journey with us around the world. So we can kind of connect an ANZ bank in Australia with an RBS in London, come together and say, well, how are you doing this kind of thing? And building those best practices. What are the benchmarks? What does good look like when it comes to building an experienced business? Those kind of things is what we've been able to do a lot with. And it's been great because we also learn from some of the best marketers out there. So, we've hired a bunch of people from Dell as well, but there's some great talent in Dell that they've always pushed that kind of envelope, but getting what can Dell share with the rest of other industries as well, and bringing that community together has been a real rewarding process for us, and we continue to do that.
Matt?
I'm going to take a slightly different tack with that, because I think the reality is that all of us on the stage and all of you in the audience, we're embarking in a pretty interesting era. I term that the fourth industrial revolution, and I think it's expressed in different ways. And some of our customers are having some real challenges with how they're going to set about going through this revolution. It's about how data is created, it's about where data is created, and it's about how we manage and architect our environment, moving away from a legacy environment towards one that can take advantage of the new world that we're entering into. I'll give you an example of that. North of Sydney, where I come from, about 100 kilometres north, there are 3 coal-fired power stations. Now, these power stations are multi-billion-dollar facilities. These power stations are absolutely mission critical. They provide the Sydney Basin, some 6 to 7 million people, with the power that they need to drive commerce, to cool their houses in summer, etc. Well, the thing is that I went out to have a look at one of these facilities, and when I walked around, I was quite fascinated, because what you'll notice when you walk inside one of these utility installations are the amount of cameras that they've got. And I'm not talking about video cameras looking at me or looking at the staff. We're talking about cameras that are pointed at blank walls, cameras that are looking at pipes, cameras that are actually focused on the facility. And so it begs the question, what are these cameras doing? Well, these are 4K cameras, and these cameras are looking for microscopic changes in vibration within the utility itself. They're looking into the brickwork through thermal technology to see if there are changes in the temperature of the subsurface infrastructure. The point is that the amount of information that comes from a 4K camera is huge. Each facility has 1,496 cameras. This is too much information to send to a public cloud. This is too much information to send back to a central data center. And so we are helping customers like this to think about the architectural choices that they need to make in the future to be able to make sense of the amount of information that's being generated at the edge. This is a great example of the IoT. And it has fundamentally changed the paradigm that we've thought about for the last number of years of having on-premises infrastructure and having a cloud solution. Today and into the future, we're going to move into an era where we need to start thinking about this new IoT realm. And so, of course, how you architect a system, how you have centralized control planes, and I'll avoid going too technical here, but how do you make wise investments, whether you are in utility or whether you are in retail and you have a lot of data being generated at the store edge, how do you think about these new challenges that we're going to be facing in the future?
Valérie, does that resonate with
yes.
you? Yeah.
We took a participation in Sigfox a few years ago, and we are working with them a lot on Internet of Things. So definitely all the data you will collect, you have to think of the infrastructure where you will collect all this data. So yes.
Mm-hmm. So is it required a kind of massive new investment in data infrastructure, or do you expect that it will?
For sure.
That's good.
For sure, but the first thing to make understand to people that you have to clean your data. Data is fine, but you have to clean your data. So today we have set a lot of target to our sales rep in order to collect data, customer data. But we have also to educate people around what is data which you could really utilize after and use. So it's a challenge. Data management is definitely a challenge for a company like us.
I think the technology and things like IoT is amazing, but to transform legacy businesses, it is the people. I think it's the people that you need to find a way, how they're organized, how they're enabled. You know, compared to a lot of startups that are out there, that transformation is the hardest. I mean, that utility, you know, when they've got those cameras going on, how do they, you know, what did they do before 4K cameras with IoT existed? How do they go through that transformation to go from what they used to do to what they were doing now? That, I think, is what companies to look at as they transform. So if there's legacy companies out here, technology, I would say, is not a given, but you've got to go with what the latest technology is. Getting the people to use it and changing the way they work because of the technology, I think, is the hard bit.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think, the technology part of it is really the easiest piece, because technology doesn't have aspiration, hopes, dreams. Yep. It's a machine, it's a piece of technology. Change is hard for people. And at Intel, we went through a big change a few years ago when we really made a transition from being a PC-centric company to a data-centric company. And we're approaching our 50th anniversary in July, so I guess that does make us a legacy company. But for people that have been in a company for 10, 15, 20 years that then have to change and embrace that change, it's not straightforward, and it really requires the senior leadership to be bought in and to articulate a vision of where we're going and how we're going to get there, and why this is good for the company, and bring people along. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, Intel, we're a company of roughly 100,000 people, and to get that many people behind a vision and a period of change very quickly is it's not easy, but it has to be done.
Like on our own transformation, there was it had to be repeated down, and so leadership had to be agreed, bought in. It was changing the way people had done things forever, and some people don't come along for the journey, and they need to exit the business. So it's sort of, as long as everything's from a top-down view lined up and there's a vision and they're heading in the right direction, you just need to drag people along with some of that kind of change. As long as you can give people the tools, enablement, how they're working to bring them along, then you can kind of say, well, who's going to make this through this journey and who isn't?
Right. Right. Well, and it does seem that it's you know, it's easy to talk about doing new things, right, and thinking about things in new ways and these kinds of transformation. But as you say, people don't really like to change, and people have the skills that they have. I mean, we've seen this a lot. I mean, Reuters is a news organization. We've had a tremendous amount of change in recent years, and it requires, in many cases, there are different skill sets involved. So as a wire service, it was strictly reactive. You know, stuff happens and you go out and cover it. But now we need to kind of be more than that and dig deeper and really find the deeper meaning around stories and do essentially a different type of journalism. And it's not the same thing. It's a different skill set. So how do you manage that sort of mismatch of kind of skills for what's required going forward?
To give you an example, this year we've got 300 top executives at Total, and we decided to train each of them to artificial intelligence.
How long did they spend in that training?
It was a one-day-long training, but it was a good way to open the door to another story. And we set up a data squad team, a global one, a central one, and transversal one, to help this top manager to develop and to accelerate their projects on data.
But very often the question you're going to ask is the people that you already have in your business, is taking a journalist and getting them to think in, let's say, in a more digital way, a shorter journey than getting somebody who really gets digital but doesn't know journalism? Very often the answer is that your legacy company IP is the most valuable thing that you have in terms of the core of what you do. And it's giving those people the ability to do new things or do things in a different way with a blend of external skills. But getting people across is, I think, the hardest work, but the work you have to do, because we've seen situations where you bring in this concept of the wolf and the sheep, where you've got your team that's already there, and you bring in some wolves from some startup background, and the sheep kind of make a circle and they sort of defend themselves and they don't really want to do that kind of change. So bringing moving away from the analogy, bringing the people that know the business, getting somebody who knows analysis of your business to do digital analytics is a key part of the route. You may then bring in some talent to say, this is somebody who knows how digital is done, but bringing those people along for that change is the key part of legacy business, because that IP is what makes that company, what makes a company last 100 years or 50 years, or how old is Dell?
About 40.
40, okay. So, and 35 years. So that thing is still there. It's just doing that business in a new way, and that is a transformation that legacy needs to go through.
Matt, looked like you had a comment there.
No, I was just going to build on that point. This comes down to the question of innovation and digital, and where innovation should sit inside the organization. And if you're making the point, and I completely agree with this, that it is easy to have someone with a skill set that you can teach digital than the other way around. And if we think about another example beyond the media industry, if we think about what's happening in our hospitals, do you want the IT department within that hospital doing the innovation, or do you want the surgeons and the clinicians that are actually touching the patients and interacting with the patients to learn new digital skills and be able to, I suppose, provide a better patient outcome? I know I would feel more comfortable if the innovation came from the surgeon, personally.
But there are certainly ways in which we innovate are being innovated upon, and hopefully there's some legacy companies here that are in an environment like this where they can learn from the way startups run. There's a lot of things that especially in the digital world, that startups are able to do that legacy companies haven't done. There is a lot that people that have been in those legacy business for a while learn from, so the energy that's out there, transpose that onto how their companies work and sort of go about making that change.
Right. Yeah. All right, great. Well, we're about out of time, but I think at least one lesson we can take is that the transformation of legacy businesses is possible, given that the four of you are sitting here all with fairly prosperous businesses as we're in this kind of era of tremendous digital change. So thank you very much for your participation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.